Please be seated. Every year, towards the end of January, our church calendar commemorates a feast called the Conversion of St. Paul. This year it happened on Wednesday last week. Most feasts and commemorations in the Episcopal Church's calendar don't honor specific moments in the lives of saints. They just honor their entire life. But Paul is different. Unlike most of the ancient saints about whom we know very little, we know a lot about the Apostle Paul. Or at least, we know a lot about the biblical character Paul, which is not exactly the same thing as the apostle himself. The Paul that we know from our times in church is a composite sketch. It's an amalgamation from his portrayal in many different books of the New Testament. Of course, there are Paul's letters, from which we read many Sundays. There are the letters he actually wrote, the ones other people actually wrote and signed his name to so they'd have more authority, and then the ones we're not quite sure about. But even more than the letters, we learn about the events of Paul's life mostly from the book of the Acts of the Apostles, which Carolyn read from this morning. Though written nearly 50 years later than the letters of Paul, around the year 100 or so, the book of Acts is a sequel written by the author of Luke's gospel to pick up the story from the moment where Luke's gospel ends, with the formation of that first generation of Jesus' followers after he went back up into heaven, not to be back on earth for quite some time. Paul is one of the main protagonists of the book of Acts, and his moment entering this story starts with his conversion, which we hear this morning. So Paul, actually born under the name Saul, they're the same person, was a devout Jew who made it his business to persecute other groups of Jews who had decided to worship Jesus as a Messiah. Saul had a reputation for being effective at harassing, arresting, and punishing these early followers of Jesus for disobeying the orthodoxy. But then, one day, as he is walking on the road to Damascus, he sees a flash of lightning and hears the voice of Jesus, who he had never met, calling to him, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" He is struck blind and wanders around for 3 days until God sends one of those early Jesus followers, Ananias, to go to him and restore his sight. His life is transformed, not with special powers or magical abilities, but with new purpose and new direction. No longer will he persecute those who follow the way of Jesus. Now he will build up their number. He has been converted. Conversion is a tricky word for us Episcopalians. It makes us a little squeamish, doesn't it? It's okay, it's allowed. It triggers thoughts of judgmentalism and coercion. And frankly, that's quite understandable, given the way judgmentalism and coercion have been linked to religious conversion in various times and places throughout history. Even Paul's own conversion story contains some elements of coercion and judgmentalism. But if we can accept that there are other ways to experience conversion, ways that frame change not as a rejection of an evil past and an embrace of a perfect future, ways that might be more gradual, ways that might continue throughout the life of a person, then I think the language of conversion can be constructive for us as people of faith. Let's consider the etymology of the word itself. Conversion actually shares the same Latin root as the word conversation, the root of which connotes neither coercion nor judgmentalism. It simply means to turn over, or maybe to turn around, to turn over, to turn around. This is what we do in conversation, isn't it? We turn things over. We turn ideas over. And then we talk about them more and more, turning them over again and again as we converse with one another, back and forth, trying on new ideas, keeping some of them, discarding others. And as we converse, eventually our values and convictions can evolve and change. And now we're different in what we believe than we were before, but it might not have been a lightning bolt moment. It might not have happened in just one instance. We have not entirely abandoned our sense of who we used to be, nor have we become exactly like our conversation partner, but we have changed. Conversation has led to some kind of conversion. This is how I would describe my own conversion to a sense of faith as an adult Christian, a very gradual process involving many conversation partners over years. I found that trying out the practices of faith, going to church, attempting prayer, reading the Bible, all preceded my sense of having become a Christian. And to be honest, my own conversion process is ongoing. I don't believe in God the same way that I did 15 years ago, and I expect, even hope, that I won't believe in God in exactly the same way 15 years hence as I do today. Conversation leading to conversion isn't just a blueprint for spiritual change. It's also a formula for the conversion we long to see in our world. Many of us these days are finding ourselves longing to see various conversions of thought or values in other people. If we are serious about wanting conversions of the heart to be non-coercive, then conversation across difference is the only way forward. But here's the hard part. It only works in both directions. To really be in conversation, we ourselves must become vulnerable and open to being changed, not just to changing others. We must be open to new insight, to new understandings of other people and of our world. Paul's conversion was complete only after he engaged with Ananias, that early disciple who restored his sight. But for that to happen, Ananias also had to be converted from his fear of Paul, converted from his belief that Paul was evil, not to be associated with, converted from his reluctance to have anything to do with this guy. Paul's conversion, which led to the establishment of the whole church in that first century, hinged not just on Jesus' invitation, but on Ananias' willingness to be vulnerable, engaging someone that he thought was his enemy. Food for thought in these days. Food for thought, I think. Our beloved church, all of us together, is also in a constant process of conversion. So it seems fitting that the conversion of St. Paul falls near our annual parish meeting every year. Annual Meeting Sunday, for those who are newer to the community, is our time to reflect together on our ongoing life as a parish. That's why, starting last year and continuing this year, we're going to use a format that involves more conversation, speaking and listening to each other. The hope is that as we converse with ourselves, rather than just listen to PowerPoint presentations or thumb through spreadsheets, that our conversations will lead us to some kind of conversions in our collective thinking about who we are, what gifts we have to offer, and how God is inviting us to move forward into the next phase of life as a church together. As I look back on the past 5+ years as your rector, I'm struck by the ways we have already been converted as a community of faith in that time. Now, some things about us are still the same as they were 5 years ago, and indeed many years before that. We still find our greatest joy in relationships with God and with each other. We still proclaim a simple understanding of faith, that God is love, that God loves us and the whole world, and that God yearns for us all to love each other more fully. And we still cannot figure out how to get that motion sensor light in the back classroom from staying on all night. If you drive by the church at night, this has been a 5-year problem. You'd think there'd be a solution. But a lot about who we are as a parish has changed, too. We've grown about 30% in the past 5 years. We've established several new ministry opportunities in the parish and involved many more of you in those opportunities, especially in leadership. We've discovered how meaningful mission experiences can be when we travel to Haiti or Appalachia. We've seen not just a complete turnover in the parish staff, but a structural change in having a second priest come among us. Where are you? There you are. Hi. We've given necessary attention to our building so that it can serve as our spiritual home and as a resource to the wider community. We've become delightfully willing to try things out, and some of them don't work, and that's okay. Our conversion into being this kind of a parish was not a random occurrence. It was something that you, as a parish, dreamed of, and then discerned, prioritized, planned for, and executed. It's work that began back in 2008, nearly a decade ago, the last time we really initiated any kind of strategic planning process. And as we think about where we are as a church in the cycle of change, I believe we're ready to enter a new time of visioning about how God might be inviting us into the next phase of our own conversion. What dreams do we have for who we long to become as we continue sharing life in this parish together? What resources, gifts, and talents and passions has God brought among us and revealed to us? How is God changing us so that we might change the world? Today's annual meeting is just the beginning of what I hope will be a robust, year-long conversation with each other about our vision for a shared future together. I look forward to working with the vestry in the coming months as they plan for ways to develop this conversation as a whole parish, and then to engaging in it with all of you. Now, it's no secret that entering into times of visioning can feel a bit uneasy. Change, even just thinking about it, can be a little unsettling. Some at times may feel confused, like Paul in his blindness. Others vulnerable, like Ananias in his fear. As one of you put it to me this week, going from being to becoming is a move into uncertainty. What we know is that the more broad our conversation, the more inclusive and inviting and methodical the process of discernment is, the more we can trust that God abides in the shared vision that emerges. We're only at the beginning, the start of planning to plan, as people in this business says. But I already know that each one of your voices will be critical to our shared conversation. And that's because each one of you has a unique, valuable, and slightly different understanding of who God is and what God dreams for us as a church. With all of us together, we can begin the process of conversing and converting and conversing and converting until we arrive at some articulation of how Christ is leading us onward together. May God give us patience and wisdom, a spirit of forbearance and inspiration as we engage this work together. Amen.